Yeah, I'm extremely optimistic this time,
Keep
Ben.
the good vibes going. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so let's do it. By the way, when you're listening to this, just know that I'm still, in a way, struggling with some aspects with my iMac Pro and using audio hijack and loopback and just routing audio like a maniac. And it's like I sometimes have trouble, like the guest can't hear the audio, so that's what really stinks this time is Ben cannot hear the music or Barry's voice, so we're going to be recording this without the music and without Barry's voice, which is, a shame, because Barry likes to put in his 2 cents. But anyway, so we're going to rock it. So I say all that to say, here's me, and by the way, I rearranged my studio and stuff, so I cleared up this room, so it's a much bigger room now, and I'm wondering, as we're recording this, even right now, I'm wondering if it sounds like I'm in a bigger room. Do you hear any reverb or anything? And also, right now, the HVAC unit is not on, but it's across the basement. Like, it's probably, 35 feet away, something like that. But it's not on right now. But when it comes on, I'm in sort of, I'm in sight of the door where the sound comes out of, because I changed my spot in the room. So anyway, I'm wondering if you'll be able to hear that unit in the background. Now, in post-production, I do plan on gating my track, which means if it's really low in the background, which it will be, it'll be low in the background, the gate might just take it out. So anyway, I'm wondering if you can hear that. So let's get started, and here's me trying to start the show like I'm hearing music and hearing Barry. Yeah, oh yeah. All right, welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show. I'm Chris Curran. I produce podcasts for the likes of E+ and Forbes and Johnson & Johnson and Dun & Bradstreet. Every week on this show, podcast production techniques on a silver platter. Me and my guests, we serve them up to you. We talk the hardcore audio engineering aspects to podcast production. And I have a background in audio engineering in the music business, and you can go to the website and check out all my album credits and all that cool stuff. If you implement the best of what you learn here, your podcasts will sound a lot better and you'll spend less time producing them. And of course, Barry is with me, but Barry's not with me. I should have changed my intro. Anyway, by the way, the HVAC unit just came on. So I'm going to pause. This is not I'm not pausing for station identification. I'm pausing to see if you can hear any background noise. Can you hear any? All right. Well, I don't know if you could hear that, but I just made a note to myself to take the gate off for that part right there. And anyway, so my guest today, and Ben Brown is a trooper because this is our third time recording this session. And the first time, well, there's reasons. Let's put it, and it's not, it's not all because I'm an idiot. All right, some of it is, I think, but okay. Anyway, Ben Brown is here.
Yeah,
you were waiting for this. You're probably listening to this, going, you know what? This is like, I don't know, last fall sometime. I was just driving down the road and wondering when Ben Brown was going to be on the Podcast Engineering Show. Well, today's the day. All right, he's the host and producer of the Municipal Equation podcast and also the Tourette's podcast. And I'm real happy, Ben, that you're here. So thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I mean, third time's the charm, I hope. So we're going to get it right.
Yeah, I don't even want to, all right. Should we leave people hanging what happened the first two times, or should I tell them?
Go for it. I mean, I'll leave that to you.
All right. Well, the first time was literally probably about 24 hours after there was a death in my family. So I thought it was too late to it was almost too late to cancel the session. But then I was wondering if I could do it anyway. And then when Ben, you and I got on the call that day, immediately I knew I just couldn't do it. And so you were really nice, and we rescheduled.
Yeah, well, there's a vibe to the show, and I hope everybody is in your family is doing well and healing in the best way possible. The thing I like about the show is it's good vibes and it's high energy, and that just wasn't the time to do it.
Oh yeah. There's no way I could have acted like a complete idiot on that day. It takes anyway. The second time we got together, we had I was using my iMac Pro, and we had some technical difficulties, and again, you couldn't hear the music or Barry, which was weird. Mm-hmm. Which that's the first time that's ever happened. So I was like, all right, let's do it without the music and Barry, which is totally doable. But then, like maybe 8 or 10 minutes in, you started to sound like a robot, and it sounded like one of those times when someone's audio interface, the connection just isn't good. I had that problem a million times with my Focusrite Scarlett 2i2s. When I'd connect with guests and clients and stuff, like it'd sound robotic, and I would just unplug it for like 3 or 4 seconds and then plug it back in, and it would sort of reset, and then it would be fine. So anyway, we had problems, and we aborted. We said, you know what, we'll do it another day. And so thanks for coming back, Ben. I want to really get into the speed round right away, and I want you to tell us, just take us through your whole recording and mixing and all the post-production that you do. So start with your microphones and start with whatever your signal chain is, and then just mention all the equipment real quick, and we'll obviously get into it later. And then also how you mix it, what software you use, and about tagging an MP3. Take us all the way to the end when you literally are uploading an MP3.
Cool. So my microphone, and I do a few different scenarios. This is if it's just me in the studio doing my voiceover or my narration in an interview with someone on a remote connection, kind of like this. I'll be using an Electro Voice RE20. That's my go-to microphone. It's a classic. I know you're familiar with it too. And from there, I go through a mic activator that adds about 20 or so decibels of clean gain. And most people are familiar with the Cloud Lifter for this, and I have one of those, but I use something called a Cathedral Pipes Durham. It's a handmade piece out of, I believe the company's based in California, but they have a mic activator called a Durham. So even though I have a Cloud Lifter, I prefer to use the Durham. It just sounds a little bit better to me. The RE20 into the mic activator and then into my recorder, which usually is a Zoom H5. I record phone interviews on that thing too, and I guess, we can talk about kind of the setup for that. But for this session today, I'm going through my computer. I'm recording into my DAW through my interface. The interface is a Steinberg UR-44. Got 6 inputs. It's got 4 of those combo jacks. The mic pre's are great. So that's what I'm using today. The RE20 into the Durham mic activator, into the Steinberg UR-44, into my recording software on my computer, which is Reaper. And
Reaper!
Yeah.
Oh, wait,
yeah,
Ben, you don't use Pro Tools, man? Come on.
I'm sorry, I'm lame. No, I'm Team Reaper. No,
so am I. I'm lame too.
I love Reaper all the way. And for monitoring, I use some old Mackie monitors and some M40X headphones from Audio-Technica, as well as some Grado SR80 headphones. So the Steinberg interface has 2 different headphone jacks, so I can switch back and forth between headphones without having to unplug. And that's my hardware chain. So when I'm in Reaper, I export out to Wave of 44.1, and then I go to, so I take that, I open up a new session of Reaper to kind of master the file and give it the final set of treatments. And then I go into a program, a simple audio editor called Goldwave, which has been mentioned on this program, I think a couple times before. And that's where I use just the very, very final bit of leveling and volume treatment. And I export to MP3 at 112, which I find to be, it's not the highest quality, but it's the lowest level that I can get away with to where it sounds fine. If I go any lower than that, some of my music and stereo effects will have some artifacts on top of it. So 112 ends up being kind of passable for me. And then I go to Libsyn, and that's where the hosting is. So I just upload it there.
Dude, oh man, we got so much to talk about here. This is awesome. So your RE20, first of all, I use an RE20, and it's a great mic.
I love it.
Did you use any mic before an RE20?
Yeah. So it's funny. So before what I do now professionally, which is pretty much inside the world of communications and advocacy, I was a news reporter for newspapers, but a good amount of that time was also spent in radio. And at the station I worked at, you would find 2 different microphones dominantly, and you can guess what they are. One was the RE20 and the other was the SM7B. And I liked the way I sounded on the SM7B, but I loved the way I sounded on the RE20. And this is the funny part. So you had Bandrew Scott on a while back.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of his YouTube channel. He does a really cool, he does really cool product reviews there, and he loves the SM7B. He likes the RE20, and he's used that, but I think he said after spending some time with each microphone, he decided that the SM7B was the right one for him because it's a little bit darker on top than the RE20 is, and he likes that darker sound. Funny enough, I do too, but I find that on my voice, the RE20 comes off a little bit darker. And he and I have voices that are somewhat similar, I guess, but it really shows how objective this whole microphone, or subjective, I guess, this microphone thing is. It is true that different mics sound different on different kinds of voices, but back in my days of doing radio, I knew I was going to have to buy an RE20 for myself at some point. But I bought the SM7B first because I found a really good deal on it, just for really cheap. So I used that for a long time until a couple of years ago when I found a good deal on the RE20, and I picked that up. And now that's really all I use when I'm podcasting in the studio. If I'm outside doing an interview out in the field, I'm using an Audio-Technica 8035, and that's a shotgun mic.
Right. I remember last time we talked, we did get to that. You mentioned that AT8035. So, it's what you're saying about the different microphones on different people's voices is so true. It's like that's the whole reason that I do that microphone test drive booth that I did at Podcast Movement, because you don't know until you talk into a mic how good it is for your voice. You don't know, right?
That's right. You hear the rave reviews for like the Heil PR40, and that's great on some voices. It's not so great on other voices. You just have to try it for yourself and see what sounds right to your ears, and that's the best starting point. I mean, without effects, pre-effects, and all that, if you sound good on your microphone, if it's something that someone else has bagged on along the way, but you've tried it and you think it sounds great on your voice, that may be the microphone for you to at least try out for a while.
Right. And so you're doing at least 2 podcasts, Municipal Equation podcast and the Tourette's podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
You're hosting both of them?
Yeah. Okay. Host, produce, it's basically a one-man show for each side.
Oh, it is? Okay. So so if you're listening to this, go check out Ben's 2 shows real quick and just listen to his voice on his RE20. I mean, you're hearing it on my show here, and actually, I forgot to ask you, Ben, are you recording on your side today?
I am, yeah. I'm recording into Reaper, and I'm backing up into the Zoom H5.
Oh, man. High five. I mean, come on, people. How cool is Ben Brown? He's just backing it up, man.
Got to be safe. I've paid the price before, so.
That's awesome. So Ben, you will send me your local file then, and then
absolutely,
then I'll mix it. So I'll do my mixing on it, but then check out Ben's 2 shows to hear his voice there. It's always good to listen. That's interesting. Always good to listen to the same voice through the same mic, but mixed by 2 different people. Right?
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I've kind of gone through that before, and you can get pretty different takes on what it's quote unquote supposed to sound like for an audience.
Right. So, all right. So your mic activator, I love how you call it a mic activator. And is that what Cathedral Pipes calls it as well?
I think they call it that. So they make these sort of Neumann or Telefunken style condenser microphones and ribbon mics. And I think they market this thing for the ribbon mics. But so they make this great mic activator. Durham is spelled Durham. So you just run your mic's XLR cable into it. And then you run another XLR cable from the Durham into your interface, your digital recorder, and it adds this really nice, clean signal boost. So you don't have to crank up your input knobs and wreak havoc on, with self noise and all that. Right. So it's just, this is not an ad, they haven't paid me, but it's just $65 compared to the $150 price tag on the Cloudlifter. And I don't want to stir up any controversy, but I mean, I've placed them side by side and cranked the monitor volume in my headphones.
Right.
And the Cathedral Pipes is quieter. So I end up using that. And it could just be, an issue with my Cloudlifter, but, it still sounds great on its own. I just prefer the Cathedral Pipes.
That's awesome. And, you mentioned Bandrew Scott before, and I think he's done a video on the FET head and the Cloudlifter. I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. He did a shootout between, I think, 5 or 6 different mic activators, and some of them were actually kind of problematic. I think for him, the Cloudlifter still performed the best.
Okay. Yeah, those, I thought I've seen people sort of recommend the FET head because it's smaller than the Cloud Lifter, and I think it's even a little cheaper as well. But I've never heard of the Cathedral Pipes. So I'm wondering, did he include that in the 5 that he did?
I believe he did, yeah. Now, I had already had one by that point, but I was really intrigued at the outcome. So I don't know if the handmade nature of these devices, cause some variance in how they perform, but who knows? I just had a different experience than he did.
Right. So let's. I think this session we should really talk about Bandrew Scott a lot, and
sure,
just to mess with him first of all, but second of all, because I don't know, the last week or so he's been coming out with some videos that are really cool. I mean, he does a really good job making those short videos.
Oh yeah, I mean the amount of stuff that he packs into like a 5 or 6 minute video is pretty amazing. Just the different use cases, 'cause it's not just voice, it's guitar, it's electric, it's acoustic. Put the mic on the amp and all that. I mean, it's really neat. So you really get a sort of a 360 sense of what that mic can do.
Yeah, and I was just thinking that I usually always watches videos on my phone. And so I'm not even listening in my studio and like really listening on good monitors. Like, you know what I mean? So when his videos are playing, I hear what he's saying, and I can, generally, you could tell how it sounds like a mic, but you can't really tell on a smartphone. You know what I mean? So,
right,
but it's so cool
that full spectrum.
What'd you say?
Yeah. I mean, you're right. You don't have that full spectrum of the full frequency spectrum that you'd like to hear from a microphone test. Yeah,
and right, because I'm usually listening on like speakerphone on my phone, not like with earbuds or anything, even just like literally playing his videos on my phone on speakerphone, right? And so you can't really judge that too much. But my point is, even though I do that, I still love his videos.
They're entertaining. Yeah, they're fun.
And I love when he throws the box. He always throws the box behind. That's the best part. Now I watch his videos. I'm waiting just for when he throws the box.
Yeah, when he nearly, slams it into one of his guitars in the background or something like that. Or
I know.
I've seen a couple times where I think it's almost hit him in the head.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
You know what we need? We need a compilation video of all those throwing the box scenes.
Oh my God, that would be a feat. He's got so many videos up.
I know, and he literally, well, for most of the stuff he reviews, he buys it.
That's right. Yeah, I can't fathom, and I wouldn't be able to sell that to my better half. She would never approve.
Totally. All right. So the audio interface you use is the Steinberg UR-44. Has 6 inputs. You said four XLR inputs and 4 mic pre's. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's got some extra 1/4-inch inputs on the back, but it's got those 4 combination jacks on the front.
Okay, and then 4 mic pre's.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've never used that one. And what's the price point on that one?
I feel like it's about $300.
Okay.
This is maybe my 4th interface. I had the 2i2 a while back, and I had a Roland interface for a bit that actually was really noisy. And again, this could be just the unit I got. Maybe it was faulty, but I sent it back and tried a couple other things. But the Steinberg has been my favorite so far, just because it's simple. There's a lot you can do with it, and I get a really strong. In comparison to the other interfaces I've used, the pre's are really strong and clean, and I like the fact that there are 2 different headphone jacks.
Yeah, the 2 headphone jacks is, I mean, what a small thing, but when you need an extra headphone jack, you're like, thank God, right?
I love it. I mean, it's a feature that I would never think to ask for if someone, if an interface manufacturer was soliciting my feedback, but now that I see it, I'm like, you're exactly, it's simple, but I love it.
Yeah, because if you're in a position where you have 2 people and the other guy needs headphones, then what do you do? I mean,
exactly.
So when you're in that moment of needing a second pair of headphones and you can't do it, that's a pain in the ass. So that's where this would help.
I know.
But it's like a lot of features. Features are great, but like it's those times when you really need that feature where you're like, thank God.
I agree.
So, all right, Reaper.
Totally.
Reaper. I mean, I'm still using Reaper, and here's the funny thing, though. I've been setting up my iMac Pro, I mean, literally for the past few days, and today's April 30th, just if you're listening. Well, no, this is actually going to come out next week, so this is Monday, April 30th. This is going to come out on Thursday. So anyway, for the last few days, this past weekend, I've rearranged my studio. I set up my iMac Pro as my main production machine now. And now I'm like struggling to figure out how to do stuff I used to do on my old production computer, like little things like tag the MP3 and, adjust the size of a picture like a JPEG. I mean, so anyway, that turns out not to be that hard. I figured that out today. But anyway, there's a lot of other things too. One thing I will mention, switching over, this is one good thing I found out from iZotope, because I use RX6 Advanced and I also use Ozone 8. I was like trying to figure out like how can I wanted to keep my backup machine, fully functional, because if I ever need it if the iMac Pro all of a sudden one day doesn't turn on, then I need a machine where I can do my production, right? So I was absolutely. Well, how do I leave RX6 and iZotope on there, but then you also use it on my new machine? And what I found out, you can actually have it on both, but you can't have the program open on both computers at the same time. Isn't that awesome?
That is awesome.
So now I can use it on my new machine, but if I ever need to use it on my old machine, I can use it there. So thank you, iZotope. It's the little things in life.
That's true.
All right, Reaper. So in Reaper, like mixing and effects like talk to me about effects like compressors and EQs and all that. What do you use, if any?
Yeah, sure. And just to kind of set this up, I mean, this is something that's really kind of sped up my workflow. So I've made a bunch of templates for different microphones and different scenarios and different environments that I may be in. And so not to be confused with presets on plugins, but these are templates of effects chains that I've put together in Reaper, and I can call them up for different situations. So for example, when I'm in my studio doing narration or interviews, just like now, I'll drag that file of my voice into a template that I've made called RE20 Home Studio. That's just what I've named it. So it's got an effects chain that's specifically tailored to my voice on this microphone in this environment. And I've made other templates for other, like on-location interviews, like a noisy convention hall or a big conference room, or noisy outdoors or quiet outdoors. So I drag that file into the template and tweak the parameters as I need, because the dynamics are never really always going to be the same. I mean, a template is not going to be universal for everything. So the templates are a great starting point that I can tweak as needed, and they're a savior in terms of workflow and the amount of editing time I need to invest. So, for example, my RE20 Home Studio template, it starts with a compressor, and I actually use the stock compressor, which I really like Reaper stock plugins. I have a bunch of third-party ones that I've accumulated over the years, but I find that Reaper's stock plugins are pretty good, even though people may bag on stock plugins. It's kind of like, just whatever suits you, just like you said with microphones. It just seems to be the case. But so I'll go 4-to-1 of fast attack, pretty fast release, starting with that compressor. And then I will do another compressor super light at 1.1 to 5 or something like that, 1 to 5 to 1. And then an EQ. And this is one I think I got for free, this EQ plugin called a Baxter EQ. And it's just one of those totally random plugins, just like a million others out there. It's got a long, I got it forever ago from a website called Plugin Boutique. And this is where I start cutting out the fat and tidying up the low end and cutting out those terrible low mids where it sounds like you're talking into a Dixie cup. And actually, for me, it's about, I guess, some surgery on the top end as well. But it's more about cutting than boosting for me. Just cutting out, 3 to 5 dB here and there. I just have a voice that I think can come off kind of bright to my ears. So sometimes I back off on points at the high end. And then after that, I add noise reduction. And for that, I use the Waves NS1. And I love it. It's a simple one fader plugin. And that's where you just kind of hike up the fader to reduce the noise. And obviously, if you do it too much, then it starts destroying the good audio that you want. So I raise it just a little bit, and it goes up to 100, I believe, and I just raise it past 10. So it's very subtle. I mean, the first thing I like to do is just make sure I have a quiet room, which is probably the most important part. But and then one more EQ, another stock EQ on Reaper. And again, just following up on some of the previous points in the FX chain. So just to kind of get the low end right and the low mids and the high end. And that's really it for that template.
That's awesome. So your first compressor is one of the Reaper compressors, and it's see, that's the thing, like with effects and the quality of effects and plugins and stuff. Like cheap plugins will really show their cheapness when you really use it in an extreme way. So if you're just
that's why I have to use it really subtly. Yeah.
Right. So so if you're just using a little bit of this, little of that, it's totally fine. I mean,
yeah. And here's one of my quirks too. I'm not a big fan of noise gates, at least with how I have it set up. And there's a good place for them. I'm glad they exist. But sometimes, and maybe this is just a quirk, but I don't like how people tend to use them sometimes, which is just to vacuum out the audio entirely between words and sentences. Because I think sometimes that can sound kind of distracting. I used to use a noise gate, and I would go back and listen, and I would be talking, and it would sound fine, but then just this vacuum silence in between all the words and phrases. And so I kind of eschewed the noise gate at one point and just kind of settled for basic noise reduction plugins, noise suppression plugins, like the Waves one that I mentioned. But treating the room to reduce the number of reflective surfaces, I mean, that goes a long way, and that's probably the most important part. One thing that I think is kind of quirky, I'm not an Audacity user. I'm glad it exists because it's a great way for people to get into audio because it's free. I don't use Audacity, but I do find that the noise reduction that you can do on that program is not bad. It's actually helped me out a couple times where the plugins I was using in Reaper, you can really push them, but then you get this kind of watery, robotic kind of sound. And I just, as a last-ditch effort, I'm like, let me just see what Audacity can do. And it was kind of okay. It was a little bit better than what I was facing inside Reaper, which I know is maybe a shortcoming of the plugin selection that I have. But for what it's worth, which is free, I mean, that's kind of cool.
That is cool. All right, so the Baxter EQ thing you like, that and that's not a Reaper plugin. That's a third-party plugin.
Yeah, and I think it's more for coloration than anything. But I mean, you can do some effective stuff with it when it comes to cutting out the low mids, maybe around 400 or 500 hertz, for example. But when I mess with the low and high end on that plugin, it's kind of pretty. You kind of get more of a treatment rather than an effective cut or boost of those frequencies. So it kind of finesses things a little bit. That's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's how I always felt with like really high end EQs, like in person, like hardware gear back in the studio days.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
When you use a really high end EQ, it doesn't sound like every other EQ. There's something else going on there, so it's cool.
That's right. Yeah, you would think the science of cutting and boosting at certain frequencies would be relatively flat, but yeah, I mean, just the craft that goes into making these plugins will vary.
Yeah, totally. It's the coloring and that's why I'm getting into on my iMac Pro. I'm going to start using the Waves plugin. It's a new one called the Sheps Omni Channel, and I think I mentioned it before on the show. But my plan is on my old production machine, leave all the plugins I was using there again, just in case, and then on the new machine for now, just use the Sheps Omni plugin because it literally has everything you need. It has a compressor EQ, has 2 de-essers, it has, mic pre-distortion if you wanted that, it has filters. It really does have a lot. So anyway, I've used it a few times, but over the next week, like actually next week on this show, I might just do a whole episode. Yeah, I'll do an episode. A session. I'll do a solo session. And one day I'm just going to decide to call them episodes and just be done with the whole stupid thing. But anyway, I'm going to do a solo session. I might do a solo session about my new iMac Pro setup and the plugins, that I am using and stuff like that. Because I also have the SSL G channel strip plugin. I have that on my new computer as well. So that's a good channel strip as well. Yeah. So, all right, the Waves NS1 for noise reduction. Yeah. Totally, trying to fix it in the room and record it properly instead of fixing it later. Yeah, you nailed it with that one. That's always just way easier.
It really is the most important part. I mean, so what I do professionally, I work with local governments, and sometimes they will reach out to me and just about, what do I need to start a podcast? That question. And sometimes they've gone about it, but then it's really noisy. They're making some assumptions, and that's okay because they're exploring and they're trial and error and they're learning. But usually one of the questions that comes in is, how do I reduce this noise? And it's not self noise. It's not like microphone hiss. It's not that they have the inputs in too loud. It's the reverberance in the room. And that's the first thing I'll have to say is look for a different room. Just go into different rooms, clap your hands and listen to what, how many times does that sound bounce around the walls? Do you have a library that you can go into with books all over the walls? Is there a room with a big sofa or something like that? I mean, just kind of start there. And if you don't have a big budget for, Hollywood sound treatment, then just try to find a room with a bunch of stuff in it and see if that sounds better to you. So it's all about that process of finding something where you don't have to do too much in post.
All right, so you're using Mackie monitors, right?
Yeah. These are, and I feel dumb because I'm blanking on the name, but these are pretty, as far as the model number goes, these are pretty old. They're probably about 15 years old, but they sound nice and flat to me. So I have them just kind of positioned where they're sort of like a triangle coming at my ears, and that's kind of the best way to get a sense of what you're sounding like without too much. You just get a direct sound that way.
Right.
Depends on where you sit, depends on where the monitors are. But for what these monitors are, they're not the most expensive monitors in the world, but they do the job for me. I think the point or the takeaway from that is I also use headphones, 2 different kinds of headphones. I'm kind of obsessive, so I will do also a test where I'm just listening on a laptop without any external speakers. And if there is, say, like a rising hiss or a sudden hiss right before I start talking, that's maybe a cue that I need to go back and do something else that I wasn't hearing when I listened to the monitors. And so it's a combination of things that I consider just one giant monitor that helps me get the show out with pretty clean audio.
That's cool. Yeah, real near field monitors like speakers are just great because that's definitely the best way to hear what you're doing. And again, not everyone can have that in their setup or even afford that, but really they're not that. You can get decent speakers for not that much, but again, then you got to
get some used ones that you can find on Craigslist, and there's a lot out there.
Well, no, there's the one there's actually one I researched and I almost bought. It's I forget which model it is, but they're $150 a piece, so $300 for a pair. And like professionals were saying that like these are almost as good as the expensive speakers.
Wow.
So I should figure out what they are, huh?
I want to know. That's a deal.
There they are.
What is it?
The JBL LSR 305s.
Okay. I like JBL monitors. I guess I'm not familiar with these specifically.
Yeah, they're a near field monitor, 5-inch woofer. They're powered, which is awesome. And they are, I think they're about $150 each. So for a pair, you're going to pay $300, but they're powered. And again, they're supposedly like for the price, really nice, flat, accurate studio monitors. So anyway, just
$300 is pretty good. And I guess for people listening who aren't familiar with that, $300 sounds like a lot of money. You can buy a really nice microphone with that, but for monitors, for nice monitors, you're getting away pretty good for $300.
Yeah, 300 is awesome. All right, so then you got the Audio-Technica headphones, the AT-M40X.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. First off, I like it that they sound good, but they're also really comfortable, and I can wear them for long periods, which is really, really important to me because sometimes I go into the night editing podcast episodes. And if you got that kind of thing where your ears get sore after a while, you start to get kind of cranky and that kind of shows and you want to be done with it quickly. But these, I can be patient. They're just very comfortable and they sound nice and clear. And I feel like they pick up a lot of stuff that other headphones don't when it comes to giving me what I need to know to edit my podcast cleanly.
Mm. And that's awesome what you said, by the way, of checking your mixes on your speakers and checking them on your headphones and checking them on a laptop. That's like...
Right.
That's like the best way to train your ears is to just listen to everything you do on all different speakers in your car, everywhere. On your Alexa, my wife and I just got one of these Alexa speakers. Want to hear my first reaction, Ben?
Sure.
It's the government spying on us all. That's all it is. I'm not kidding.
We're talking about Bandrew Scott again, I think.
Really?
I think I can't tell, some degree of joking maybe, but on his podcast, he's mentioned that a few times about paranoia, about having this listening device inside his home.
Yeah. No, I guarantee you, we know they're doing it. And by the way, thank you for bringing up Andrew Scott again. I wanted to keep bringing him up this session, but anyway. But no, come on. You can't turn the thing off, Ben. Like, there's no off button. You have to unplug it from the wall.
If somebody wanted to listen to you, they could, I imagine. So
I just watched all these videos recently on YouTube about these guys who they're like testing it. They'll go to like a bunch of websites, look at the ads, and the ads don't make any sense. There's no rhyme or reason for the ads. And then they'll shut their browser and they'll have a microphone plugged into their computer this whole time. They're basically talking into a microphone. They'll just start talking about dog food and dog toys and dog food and dog this and my dog house and everything. And then they go back to the same websites, and all of a sudden there's all these ads for dog food and dog toys.
When I was, so my better half is now my fiance, and when I was shopping around for engagement rings, all of a sudden these engagement ring ads started showing up at my computer at home and at work. My work computer, which had nothing to do, and for one, I have to hide my browser every time she comes around because I don't want to see, she knows what's up. She'll look at an ad. She knows what I've been shopping for recently. And if she sees an engagement ring ad, what is she going to take from that? So.
Yeah. It's too weird. It's kind of funny, but it's really not funny, actually.
I agree.
Yeah. All right. So you do one session of Reaper for mixing. Basically, you're using your effects. You're making it sound good, right? And then you said you do a second session of Reaper for the mastering process, right?
Yeah. So open up a new session of Reaper, and I drag that WAV file in there. And again, it's 44.1, 24-bit. And so I just do a little bit of subtle compression just to start out, just to kind of even it out a little bit more so I can kind of hike the volume in the end. And I get it. I'm completely aware and respectful of the LUFS and podcasting standards, but I just kind of get it as close to zero as I can without it peaking out, and with everything being pretty uniform, but with also a bit of dynamics.
Right.
So I start with the compression just to kind of get me there a little bit, and then I do another de-esser. I actually have a de-esser in my first effects chain when I'm just doing my initial recording. I have a really sibilant voice, and so I feel like a lot of my effects are kind of targeted toward getting that S to be a little bit more tolerable. So a little bit of de-essing, and sometimes if you de-ess, sometimes that can, change how it sounds overall. So I'll do one more EQ, and I'll just kind of give it a little bit of treatment just to kind of sculpt it a little bit more. And again, this is on the master file, so that's affecting everything. Music and all that. I make the music for the podcast as well, so I do it in stereo. But once I got everything to where I feel like it sounds nice and loud, but also still fairly dynamic and no clipping, then I export that. And then that's when I go into Goldwave, which is a really simple audio editor. And I just do a final bit of volume treatment on that, and then the MP3 conversion.
And then Goldwave, that was also a movie.
Was it?
With Austin Powers.
Oh, yeah. Austin Powers and Goldwave. Yeah.
All right, it was Goldmember. Dang it. All right, but Goldwave is what? Just like a stereo editor, right?
Yeah, it's not a multi-track. You just put your file in there, and then you can... It has some pretty advanced features that I don't mess with too much, just because I'm usually done with that part by the time I'm there. But, I think there's a noise reduction thing in there. I don't really mess with that, but there's there are different kinds of EQs. There's parametric, and so if I wanted to do any further editing, I could, but I mainly just use that for a final bit of volume boost and the MP3 conversion. So
where do you actually do your edits?
Oh, so I edit in Reaper as well. So
really?
So my background is music recording as well, and so when I'm editing my podcast, that it looks like a music session. It's just stacks of tracks and sound effects kind of fading in and out, and I've got the bumper music and all of that. So so I do all of that inside Reaper.
Even so, how much detailed editing do you do? Like, for instance, like little lip smacks, or like if the pause between two people speaking is just a little bit too long and you want to tighten it up. Do you really go nutty with the editing in Reaper?
I do. Yeah. I get kind of obsessive sometimes with that. I think, and that's why I don't really get much sleep. Like sometimes it's a 2 a.m. type thing. It's like, oh man, I'll have this thing done by 10 p.m. And then, you're looking at the clock and it's 1:30 a.m.
Oh.
But yeah, I won't go overboard with it because I still want it to have, an authentic feel to it. But if there's something that may be kind of distracting, whether it's a really loud lip smack and you look at the waveform and it just crowds out the whole thing, or there's a long pause, or sometimes I'll say a bunch, and I'll kind of knock that down a little bit and maybe leave a couple in there just so it still sounds fairly authentic. But I don't edit it to the point where I feel like it sounds like a robotic kind of commercial sound. Yeah. There's a place for that, but I still want it to sound like a conversation. So
yeah, that's a feel thing, right? You gotta, when you're listening to it, you can kind of feel like especially if someone is dragging, like if someone is kind of, dragging and I don't know.
Right.
Like that kind of person, definitely you got to tighten up more. But if someone is just talking normal and they might say an here or there and whatever, it's
yeah, that's fine. I mean, I don't mind that, as long as it sounds like a human being talking. I've seen those plugins or those effects where it'll just automatically suck out the spaces between words, and it sounds like the disclaimer at the end of a used car commercial or something like that, and it's unlistenable because it just sounds so fake. And so I like to have that sense of humanity left in there.
Yeah, I heard that on a podcast once. I forget which show it was, but I listened to it, and when you're speaking a sentence, there's like, I just paused, right? I said, when you're speaking a sentence, pause, and then I'm going to keep talking. And when you're speaking a sentence, there's normal pauses and there's timing and all that. Mm-hmm. And then when you're done with the sentence, there's another pause. This one that I listened to, it like within a sentence, it sounded fine. But as soon as the person finished the sentence, the other sentence would start immediately. There was literally no space. It was the most unnatural thing I've ever heard. It was terrible.
I hate that.
Oh, it was terrible. I mean, and now look, that I know there's some apps, like I think I can't think of the name of the app. The Overcast, that Overcast app, it's a podcast player app, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They do something like that where you can take out little, like you can tighten up the spaces with no talking, you can tighten them up a little or something. But that's on playback, and that's the user, the listener can determine that or turn it on or turn it off.
Okay.
But the one I heard was just, that's how they publish the podcast. So you can't avoid hearing it that way.
Yeah, that's no good.
Awful. All right, Goldwave. So I'm actually looking right now for my iMac Pro a decent stereo editor. I mean, I don't want to buy SoundForge Pro because it's $300 and like their Mac version is like, it doesn't look like they're putting much energy into the Mac side of things. So I'm like, I just need a decent stereo editor. And so does Goldwave work on Mac?
I think it does. I'm not 100% positive about that just because I've been a PC guy forever. Right. I want to say it does, but I'm totally not certain.
All right. Well, if you're listening to this and you have any suggestions for me for a stereo editor for Mac, and look, I realize I could get Adobe Audition, but I really don't want to buy the whole Adobe Suite thing. In fact, I just looked it up today. It's like $80 a month for the Adobe Suite.
Yeah, it's pricey.
Really?
It's great. I mean, you get access to all kinds of stuff, but yeah, I mean, you got to have a little bit of money to do it.
And the thing with me is I would literally only use a couple things. Like, I mean, if I need to tweak any pictures, I guess I could use Photoshop, but I know they had one called, it wasn't Photoshop. It was like, Adobe Image Ready. That's an old one. That one was like a slimmed down version. Like you bring in a picture, you could make it a little lighter, a little darker. You could crop it and you could change the size and then you just save it. Like there wasn't a million features. Like so when you just needed to make quick adjustments to any image, you could. That's all I need. So I don't need Photoshop and I don't need Adobe Audition because I'm using Reaper. But anyway, so I'm not buying Adobe. So if you have any any suggestions, just have it not be Adobe because I'm not going to pay $80 a month for that. at this point.
Yeah. Well, if Goldwave ends up working for Mac, and I don't want to quote the price wrongly for anybody listening, but it's cheap. I mean, it's really, really cheap. You can get an extended free trial. It lasts a pretty long time, the free version, and I think it cuts you off after a number of uses versus like 60 days, which is what Reaper does. But I think once you're ready to pay for it, if you want to, it's less than $50, maybe $25. It's cheap.
Actually, by the way, with Reaper, they say that it's a 60-day trial, but they don't stop you from using it after 60 days.
That's true. Yeah, you got to wait for that screen to kind of time out, but you can still use it fully functionally. I chose to pay for it just because I really appreciate the fact that it exists, and I have such a good experience with it. So
yeah, me too. I did the same thing. By the way, I did purchase Fission by Rogue Amoeba. Fission is it's an audio editor, but it's really slimmed down. It's kind of like, I know it does a bunch of good things because, it was actually Paul Kafasis from Rogue Amoeba when he was on the show, on my show, this show. Yeah, he talked a lot about Fission because I asked him a lot about Fission, and it sounds great. It does a bunch of cool things. Like the coolest thing is that it can actually edit MP3s non-destructively. So you can actually edit an MP3, and then when you save it at the end, it doesn't re-encode the whole thing and degrade the quality. It just in an intelligent way puts it together so it doesn't degrade MP3s anymore, as most editors do. If you edit an MP3 and then save it again as an MP3, it actually degrades it. So anyway, Fission sounds great. I mean, it sounds like a great program, but I opened it earlier today and like it's lightweight, and I don't know it. And it's meant to be lightweight. I'm not saying it's supposed to compete with SoundForge Pro or Adobe Audition, but it's just lightweight. And I even tried to zoom in to make some fine edits. You can't even zoom in that far. And I couldn't figure out how to get my cursor where I wanted it. It was like, I don't know. I mean, I'm used to SoundForge Pro, which is just, you could zoom in forever. Like,
sure, yeah.
Yeah, so anyhow, I don't want to harp on it, but yeah, I need a good stereo editor for the Mac. All right. You export at MP3 at 112 kilobits per second. Now, is that mono or stereo?
Yeah, that's joint stereo. So I include a lot of musical elements. There's a lot of rich audio, and sometimes I'll even have a stereo microphone as well. And sometimes I incorporate that if I just want to create a sense of place, which is more of a headphones experience. But it works in the car too. But yeah, I stick with stereo.
That's cool. 112 kbps, and now pretty much the average standard is 128. So you're saving a little bit of room, going down a little more, but. It's probably not destroying your quality, of course.
Yeah, so, I picked 112 because I find that is just the minimum best. It's not as nice as, 192, but it handles better than 96, and I can definitely tell a difference between 96 and 112.
Nice. All right, now you mentioned a stereo microphone. Which stereo mic do you have?
Hold on, let me pick it up. It's right over here.
Oh, cool.
I gotta remember the number. All right, so this is the Audio-Technica AT8022, and it has the XY capsules at the top, and you can kind of move them around to different positions, but it costs about, I don't know, maybe $300 at most, but it's very nice. It sounds very, very smooth. I've used it to record music as well, putting it in front of a drum set, and it actually, it comes out great. There's a low cut switch on it. You can do the flat response, but it's really good. It's great with battery life, and I recommend it.
That's cool. All right, so it needs battery, so then it's a condenser.
That's right.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. It runs on 1AA.
Okay, that's awesome. See, I'm so in my mind, I'm so into like the binaural audio and like stereo audio when you're wearing headphones, and like you feel like you're in a certain space and all that. Like I think that's so awesome, but it's just so hard to, certainly on a podcast show like this, like I don't know how I would use that, unless right. Yeah. Unless I just go record like nature or something and be like, oh, here's me and my guest is Ben Brown, and we're sitting in the middle of the woods in Colorado.
I actually did that. I so not as specific as you just said, but I did do an episode. So Municipal Equation is all about cities and sort of changing dynamics that affect life and business in a city. And I did an episode on sound and soundscapes and the sound of a city. And I just took this microphone out all over the place in the city that I work in, which is Raleigh, North Carolina, and got construction sounds, got the bus driving by. So if you're listening to your headphones, you'll hear the bus kind of zoom from one side to the other, and, stood outside in the rain, under a canopy. But just to kind of get these effects and kind of fold them into the episode, that was actually one of my favorite episodes to do just as a sound junkie.
I just thought that like movies do this, they do the surround sound and they do it.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a skill too. It's a skill. When it comes to the really high commercial level sound effects engineering and all that, I mean, that stuff's amazing to me.
Yeah, I just, at the NAB show a few weeks ago, or I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago, a month ago, Sound Devices was there. They had a booth, and they actually lent us a MixPre 6 to use at our booth, which was the microphone test drive booth. The first day of NAB, they announced that they're partnering with, I forget the company, or is it a company or just a microphone? It's called the Ambio. It's this one mic that has basically four diaphragms on it, and they're all pointing in different directions, and you can actually use it to record 4 different signals. And then, so it's like, it's kind of like surround sound, but with one mic, but you have to record it onto 4 separate tracks. And then they have this post-processing they do, because you have to kind of orient the microphone to you have to tell the mic which is front, which is back, which is left and right, kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
And so it looks awesome. I've never tried it, but I wish I could try stuff like that.
Does that record onto separate tracks, or what do you need to get something like that?
Yeah, I would assume literally you need, that would have 4 male XLRs coming out of it, and you'd have to plug it into 4 mic pre's for sure.
Wow, yeah. I guess that's when you get into like VR and technology like that.
Yes. In fact, that's one of the things they use it for. Well, probably the main thing they use it for.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, so it's, I don't know, there's a whole thing going on there, but like for me to get into it, I don't, you know what I mean? I don't have time to mess around with all that, like to try all that stuff.
Yeah, I agree. That stuff's really cool, but it's a little bit outside of my capabilities, maybe even interests. I mean, I'd love to learn it. I'd love to know how it works, but that's a little high for me.
So you've been, what you're doing sounds awesome. I mean, you're really way above average in terms of audio production and all that. Has it been a hard road for you learning all this audio, or did it come easy?
It's kind of funny. So music is my personal background, kind of playing in bands back in the day and recording, and it's just kind of hard to leave that behind. But I learned audio through a musical lens, to mix metaphors. And again, I do the music for the podcast, and that's a way to kind of keep it fun and give it some individuality. But kind of back in the day, the music I was playing was really garagey and noisy, and this is where you have like the analog Tascam 4-track, and you can just kind of drive it into the red, and that was the sound I liked, which is not acceptable in digital. And it would be a little tough to listen to a podcast where everything is just kind of screeching up in the red. But so when I made the switch from analog to digital, and this is after my 4-track died, like way back in the day, I didn't know that you were supposed to do it differently. So this is maybe about 15 years ago. And so same thing with my mixer, I just cranked everything loud, and then you go back and listen to it, and it's just this horrible, crackly, just the worst clipping ever. And
rock and roll.
Like, okay. Yeah. It's like, well, wait a minute. Like this sounded good before, like why not now? And so it's just kind of learning. I never really had any, training or anything like that, but being in recording studios and seeing what different kinds of microphones are used for different purposes, and just kind of picking up little bits here and there, just little breadcrumbs. And then it just kind of accumulates into a decent amount of knowledge. But I mean, I'm still learning like crazy. I'm still kind of a junkie for looking at, YouTube videos and obviously listening to your podcast and hearing different ways that people do it. And sometimes I'll hear something where I'm like, I've never heard of that before, and I'm going to try it. It's just, that's what I like about audio, is there are a million different ways to do it, and there's so much personality to it. But as far as just learning the technical stuff, it was really, just 15 years of picking up little things here and there.
Nice. All right. Well, I have one more important question to ask you, but before that, I just want to remind people that the podcast you're doing is the Municipal Equation podcast, and you also do the Tourette's podcast.
That's right.
So, and obviously in the show notes we'll have links, but you want to talk about those for a second?
Sure, yeah. So Municipal Equation is the one I do for my employer, And the tagline is a podcast about cities and towns in changing times. So we look at all these emerging and futuristic issues that cities and city governments are contending with, like self-driving cars and smart city technology, and how technology is changing all these aspects about, how we live and do business in a city and so on. So like I said, it's a rich audio podcast, so a lot of audio elements that get weaved into it. And the second podcast I do is called the Tourette's Podcast. And if you listen to it, the pop culture stereotypes that you know about Tourette syndrome will just kind of melt away. So every week I have a conversation with someone in another part of the world who has Tourette syndrome, like I do. And that's the podcast. So it's kind of an outlet and a chance to let loose with real talk that isn't colored by any, sensationalism or anything like that. It's just loose, fun, and real, which ends up being my favorite thing about podcasting anyway. There aren't any rules. Yeah. You don't have to obey anybody else's format. If you do it independently, you can let loose or be totally uptight or do whatever you want. So those are the two that I do, and I help a couple of other people out with their podcasts as well at a very basic level.
Cool. All right. So you mentioned earlier your Audio-Technica 8035, the shotgun mic that you use.
Right.
Obviously, you pretty much use that in the field, I assume.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So talk about that mic, but also talk about the recorder, like how you record it, onto what recorder.
Yeah, so that microphone, it costs it's less than $300 if memory serves. And just like the other microphone I mentioned, it's a condenser mic. You can power it with a AA battery. You get a pretty good life out of it. But
by the way, let me just mention, it's the Alex Bloomberg mic, if you didn't know.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he talks very, very highly about that when it comes to just having a nice, clean, natural sound with a nice bit of air on it. There have been some times where the only thing I've done is just a little bit of noise reduction and a little bit of compression, but no EQ, because I just liked what it sounded like straight out of the mic. But I record into a Zoom H5, and that thing's small enough to where I can just throw it into a bag. I mean, it has XLR inputs on it, actually 2 of them, as well as the XY microphone or capsules at the very top. But yeah, so I just run that in there, and if I'm out in the field, the Zoom H5 is in one of my bags, and I'm kind of routinely checking on it just to make sure everything's good. It's still recording. There's a hold button on it, but you still want to be safe. And I use one of those big fuzzy dead cats on there if I'm outdoors. Otherwise, I just use that foam slip over, and I'll hold it maybe about a foot away from the person I'm interviewing, and it picks up great without there being too many, plosives or anything like that.
Right.
So it's not a close talking microphone. I mean, you'll blow that thing to bits if you talk right on it. But it's a nice mic. I love it.
Yeah. I have one too, and I've used it a bunch, and I like it. And yeah, like even like a foot away from someone talking is great. And it's such a tight, I think it's a hypercardioid pattern or supercardioid, but they're close anyway. But it's a very tight pickup pattern, so it rejects a lot from around itself, which is really handy in the field.
It's great, yeah, and people also use it for broadcast and boom miking. I mean, it's really best applied outdoors in that sense. But yeah, I've had it for a few years now, and I mean, if that thing breaks, I'm buying another one just like it.
Nice. All right, Ben Brown. Well, here's the time I would start playing the outro song. All right, so picture like
I love that outro song. That's a good song,
right? It's a good song, and so picture. All right, picture that in the background. And all right, Ben Brown. Thanks for being on the show again. The links to your Municipal Equation podcast and the Tourette's podcast will be in the show notes. But actually, why don't you what are the URLs? Just say them.
Yeah, sure. municipalequation.libsyn.com or tourettespodcast.libsyn.com.
Oh, you're using the old Libsyn web page there.
I am, yeah. The Municipal Equation is also available at nclm.org/Municipal Equation. That's where we park them on my employer's website. But just an easy way to remember it for people who are familiar with Libsyn.
Yeah, and just go to the show notes, and like I said earlier, just click through and listen to a little bit of Ben on an RE20, and then compare it to Ben's sound on my show. And I mean, it's not like a competitive thing, but it's just different, and it's good for you as a listener, and especially if you're producing podcasts, to hear different things and hear the nuances between different production. And I think that's I've never thought of that before. Have people listen to two different mixes of the same person's voice. So anyway, links are in the show notes. And Ben, you know what we have to do.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Even though we can't hear there's no music. So this is very odd. I mean, we don't hear music. I mean, the music is probably playing. But anyway, we're going to yell sound great. And
let's do it.
That's how we end the show. So, all right, let's pretend that that the music is building up. And all right, Ben, go. Sound great. Dude.
You walk away from me well, and you can't play that part so well. Why do you play it out on me now? You like to lose control well. It's quite a feeling, isn't it? Let them float and risk it down now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. What do you want me to say? It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. You react some angry. You change your attitude well. You say I just don't get it now. You say your eyes so far away now. Give up on me well, so change your game and give away. Say I wouldn't understand now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? Oh yeah, I say now, it's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. What do you want me to say? It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. You react so angry. I want you to know you will never waste me through. I've gone over all we've been through. Doesn't seem that long a time now. Things we did still hold their meaning. It doesn't mean it's still the same. You're pushing me away. You walked your theories now where you're getting worked up on you now. You walk your way around somehow now. Yes, it hurts me now where that you don't talk to me now. Now that these words have split apart now. Tell me that you're back.